All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. I know it's always hard to get to evening workshops, so thank you for your time. This is our first live session of a workshop series called Farming Through Wildfire Season. So this will go on all of next year as well, and this is the kickoff night, so we're really glad to have you here. I'm Katie Brim, and then my co-founder is Natalia Pinzon, who you'll see her picture as well. Wave, Natalia. We're the co-founders of Farmer Campus, which is an online learning platform for farmers and ranchers, and we specialize in targeted multimedia education for farmers and ranchers to really help you overcome the uncertainties inherent to farming. And tonight's topic is wildfire preparedness. And this is going to be a really great intro, and we're going to hear from BeeWell Farms as well. Before we get started, just some housekeeping. Keep yourself on mute when you're not talking, please. And then if you have video capacity, please turn it on so we don't feel lonely and feel like we're talking to just our computers. And we hope this is a discussion-based evening. So use the chat, put questions in there, talk to us. You can unmute yourself or raise your hand if you have questions. And we're going to get started. All right, you can go ahead. I wanted to start us all off with this quote from Robin Wall Kimmerer: "The forces of creation and destruction are so tightly linked that sometimes we can't tell where one begins and the other leaves off." So this is the first of a year's worth of live sessions, all digging into wildfire preparedness and resilience for farmers and ranchers. I'm sharing this quote to remind us that fire can also be a force of creation, because it can be an extremely overwhelming topic and traumatic for those of you who have actually been impacted for farms. But our goal of this first session is just to first and foremost make you feel empowered and see how fire can actually be used as a tool and a regenerative force, and also see how you as farmers can really be critical to wildfire resilience. So the goal tonight is for you to walk away with important resources, having heard some real story from real farmers who've been impacted by fires and have become prepared for the next ones. And we want to send you into this winter with an action plan with practical ways you can start preparing on your farm. And mind you, this is going to be the basics of fire preparedness. We can't cover everything tonight. So if you feel overwhelmed, just remember that true fire resilience is something that takes time and patience and energy and money as well. And so this is something we're going to be breaking down into bite-sized pieces over this series, which will span into the next year. So definitely take a deep breath, and we're going to go in. So you can go to the outline, Natalia. So tonight we're going to I'll share a little bit about our wildfire program through Farmer Campus and some of our partners. Then Natalia will share wildfire and agriculture in context to really understand what's happening right now and how farmers and ranchers are key to resilience. We'll do a breakout session so you can meet each other and have a little bit of peer knowledge. Then I'll go through the basics of fire preparedness. We have an amazing workbook that Natalia created that has some templates for you. That's a great resource for you. And then we're inviting BeeWell Farms to come in and share about their experience, and you'll have a chance to have question and answer with them. And then we'll go through the next steps for you and your farm, so what you can do to get engaged moving forward. All right, so now I just wanted to pass it off to Grace Perry from CAFF. They're our partners. They're helping us do a lot of this work. So go ahead, Grace.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, folks. My name is Grace Perry, and I work for Community Alliance with Family Farmers, also known as CAFF. And we're really excited to be partnering with Farmer Campus for this wildfire work. For those of you who are maybe new or unfamiliar with CAFF's work, we're a statewide nonprofit whose mission is to build sustainable food and farming systems through policy advocacy and on-the-ground programs that create more resilient family farms, communities, and ecosystems. And so there's a lot to kind of unpack there in the mission statement, and I'll drop a link to CAFF's website so you can explore more there if you're interested. But in the context of wildfire work, CAFF has been kind of working in the space since 2017, when the organization started its emergency fund to provide direct financial relief to farmers affected by wildfire. We have on our website an online clearinghouse of wildfire preparedness, response, and recovery resources for farmers, which I'll also drop the link to. We, in the past, have hosted workshops and town halls featuring educational speakers from wildfire survivors to experts. And then we also do, some folks at CAFF do policy work at the state level. And we are actually excitingly expanding the organization's capacity to support farmers through wildfires by hiring a new position, which is currently underway. So more news to share there. And then if you are interested in signing up or staying updated with any updates that CAFF has, either to the online clearinghouse or other events that we have, you can sign up for our mailing list at this link that I just dropped in. And then I'll also just link my email so that you can contact me if you have any questions directly. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Grace. And we wanted to bring Grace in because we really believe in cross-sector partnerships, and CAFF has been an incredible partner with us, and we partner with a lot of really other great community organizations. So these are other great resources for you all to check out. So our program is the Farming Through Wildfire Season. We have a 3-tiered approach that we wanted to just really briefly share with you before we get into things. We're working to support farmers in these 3 ways. We partner with universities, and we're doing some research as we carry out these educational programs. We also partner with community efforts and partners to do disaster response. We've worked with doing farm worker relief during wildfires, getting masks out, as well as a lot of other things. But then the core of our work is our educational programs. We can slide. So our educational work, it comes up with, we have an online wildfire course, and I really encourage you all, we'll share a link later. If you haven't seen it yet, we have a very robust, it really digs deep into a lot of these topics. We have incredible experts and farmers and professionals from across the state that share amazing, deep wildfire resilience in all ways that you can think of. So we'll share that later. We also have farmer videos and podcasts. We have a podcast series of farmers talking about being impacted by fire and how they've recovered. And there's really no better way to understand how to recover and respond than really hearing from farmers themselves. We then have an online social learning network, which is part of the course for you to be able to connect with other farmers and teach each other and share resources. And then through CAFF, as Grace just shared, we have regional town halls, which are in person or were before COVID, and we're hoping to have that next year, which in your region and county, we have someone who actually shows up and gathers resources and people to share what your local response efforts can be and what's available to you. And then we have a resource clearinghouse that's hosted by CAFF, which all sorts of amazing resources for you to check out. All right. So next, Natalia is going to give a really amazing overview of how wildfire and farmers are in context in California right now, how we got here today, and why you all are key to resilience.
Thank you, Katie, and hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. So now we'll look at how agriculture fits into the larger picture and the larger challenge of wildfires. But first, I want to briefly share how wildfires are a cultural problem. As you know by now, we are in a fire ecology, and fire has been happening on these lands for millions of years. The vegetation in the Mediterranean climate is adapted to burn periodically. California plant species are adapted to wildfires. And Native peoples understood this. They lived in relationship to fire, and still do, and used it to encourage growth to support their foodways. These frequent low-intensity wildfires reduced future high-intensity fires, which is why now California is finally accepting and recognizing cultural and prescribed burning as a tool to reduce risk after nearly 100 years of extreme fire suppression. Unfortunately, fires and fuel are growing faster than we can treat them. European forest managers in the 19th and 20th century saw fire as an enemy, and years of colonization brought a nearly global suppression of cultural burning. It also brought the enclosure of the commons, where land managed in common became divided and privatized, which brings us to how now we have over 12 million acres of private land that is more difficult to manage. What was before forest managed for the common good becomes a private responsibility. And of the 30 million acres of California forest land, 40% of it is privately owned and managed. In fact, 20% of all California land is forest land, is family owned and not industrial. 90% of those parcels are 50 acres or smaller. These are really small parcels when you think about resources for fuel load management. And with those 200,000 family-owned parcels on 7 million acres, we need to bring private landowners, many of whom are farmers, to manage our fuel load. So while farmers may only be a portion of these forest landowners, many farmers that we've worked with manage some portion of forest, especially those farming at the wildland-urban interface, which is where the greatest wildfire risk is. So farmers, ranchers, and agriculture really play a critical role in wildland fire management and recovery. Beginning with perhaps the most obvious, which is prescribed and targeted grazing of sheep, goats, and cattle, which has become really popular recently. For fuel load reduction of grasses and shrubs, which is becoming more and more accepted after so many decades of skepticism and pushback. As an added benefit, the proper management and the delicate timing of livestock in our brittle environment can actually benefit the land through nutrient cycling and invasive species management. It might surprise some folks how ranchers used to burn rangelands to reduce fire hazard and improve grazing for livestock and wildlife in California. When it was historically permitted, as you can see in this graph, upwards of 200,000 acres were burned by ranchers in a given year. So fire was used as a tool frequently by various communities that lived within our fire-dependent ecosystems. And agriculture also provides a buffer at the wildland-urban interface, especially ecologically managed farms, which have high soil organic matter in their soils and replenish their groundwater. These farms are able to provide a buffer against wildfires to their residential neighbors. Vineyards and crop fields and graze landscapes can serve as a strategic fire break, which can slow or stop the progress of a fire. And we've seen that multiple European studies that have looked for what are these drivers, what are some of the biggest drivers to wildland fire, have found agricultural abandonment in the Mediterranean region like ours to be one of the biggest drivers. Because as farmlands are abandoned and the land is no longer managed, the species that grow provide a high fuel load. And here in California, farmland abandonment is becoming prevalent because ag land is threatened by development and by global financialization of agriculture. So as we lose farmlands, we lose the important wildfire buffer and the ecosystem services that they provide. Instead, when planning and designing new development, we can integrate agriculture to coexist in a wildfire ecosystem. In this the top image on the right side, you'll see how diffuse spacing of homes requires a greater zone of defense, more firefighting resources, and more clearing of native vegetation. But clustering homes with more agricultural land surrounding those homes allows for more protective buffers, making the community easier to defend and requiring fewer resources, while also providing the rich cultural, community, and health benefits of local food systems, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. But unfortunately, the world over, farmland is declining. And in the US alone, we've seen a massive loss of farmlands, especially medium and small-sized farms, which could serve as buffers at the wildland-urban interface. And development is often at the wildland-urban interface as people want to live in close proximity to wildlands. We really believe that agriculture is fundamental in addressing the issue of wildfires. Farmers and ranchers manage forests, fuel breaks, provide buffers, replenish the ecosystem that are impacted by wildfires. And in addition, family farms provide the social capital and the jobs to revitalize rural economies, which are hurting. We've seen how farmers are critical to the social fabric necessary for supporting rural communities during a wildfire disaster in our disasters work. We've seen that on the ground. They provide mutual aid, emergency response and recovery, and people really look to farmers as community leaders in recovery. This is why in our work, we believe it's so urgent to support family farmers in wildfire adaptation, and that's why we do what we do. So I hope this gives you some fodder to think about the role of farmers in wildfire preparedness. Next, Katie's gonna lead us through some short breakout rooms where we can meet each other.
So I'm now going to get into the basics of on-farm fire preparedness. I'm about to share in the chat. Very exciting. We just created, Natalia was up last night just for you all to put together a template of our wildfire preparedness workbook that we're going to be launching and publishing next year, but we're going to share a draft with you so you can use the materials right away this winter. I'm putting this in the chat. So please go ahead, if you see the chat link, click that and you'll be brought to a workbook. And just, again, this is a work in progress. It's a rough draft, but it's such an urgent materials that we feel we want to share these materials whether we're ready or not, so that you all have them, but keep a lookout. Next year we'll have a more updated version. And also this goes along with our online course. So if it feels a little overwhelming, just know that there's how-to videos along all of these topics and themes that we can share later. And it's meant to go along with those. So go ahead and open it up, download it. I know it'll be a little distracting as you look through it, but I'm going to walk you through some portions of it. Is anyone having issues getting it? All right, I'm going to assume everyone is in there. All right, so you can see the slide. I'm going to go, these are just the basics of preparedness. And I'm going to go through these core basics for you. And again, the more in-depth materials are on the way in future webinars. All right, so go ahead and let's go to slide, Natalia. All right, so this is actually page 3 of the workbook I just sent you. So if you all would go ahead and get in there. So what does it mean to get prepared? Let's look at some of these core pieces. The first thing you can do that's extremely helpful is to just start a farm map. And you can do this by taking a GPS photo, and there's different ways to get maps of your farm or ranch and your land, or you can just hand draw this. And so what you'll want to do is basically create the topography of your land and then put clear indication of where your water sources are located, as well as location of your livestock, buildings, structures, farm machinery, equipment, electrical, and then gas and water shutoff locations. It's super important. And then it's also great to include location of things that might be needed in a fire. So like sandbags, fire extinguishers, gas powered generators, hand tools, and then areas to relocate farm assets and workers. So this is in an emergency, where would those tools be? And the reason why you do this is actually to do it before disaster strikes. So this is a great project for the winter. Create your map, and then you can actually respond or find first responders or your local fire department and actually share your map with them. You can even invite them out to your property when this is a season they're not that busy, and they can come and see all these things. And what that does is allow them to really understand how to protect your property when they come to it, as well as surrounding properties, as well as help you get livestock out or help you get vehicles out, and also to know if there's hazardous materials, what to avoid. So this is a preemptive preparedness. All right, go next. Great. All right, so then this is page 4. And this can be a little overwhelming, but really, how at risk are you? So this is the question for you to first answer. You may be extremely high risk and you may be at low risk. Some of you shared that you're in urban areas. You may be at a lower risk than those who may be farming somewhere in like Butte County or where Pie Ranch is, that Amber just shared. So what we've included for you in this workbook is we have a rapid wildfire risk assessment, and then we also have a comprehensive self-evaluation, but I'm going to start with the rapid one. And what this does is really help you understand what your risks are, but also understand what to prioritize, because it can be extremely overwhelming when you think about this as a whole topic. So we're going to break this down into your rapid risk assessment. So this is what we really recommend you do this winter. While you have some time, go through this and really understand your property's rating. And these are their 4 core main components. So we've got background risk factors like your fuel load or your slope, and you'll even see this on that slide. And then you'll look at what's your defensible space like. And so if those of you don't know what defensible space is, this is a buffer you create around your buildings, between buildings and then the grass, shrubs, trees, anything that can burn. And by creating that space, that really decreases the risk that those infrastructure will actually burn from a spark. And then we have structure hardening and emergency access points. So these are just the 4 core main components of this. And this is what we say, do this winter. It's a really quick assessment, and then you can actually start addressing those factors. And after you've done that, you'll see below this in your workbook, there's a huge comprehensive self-evaluation. We've gotten feedback from people who've taken our course. This is all materials from our course, it's extremely overwhelming, but they wouldn't want it to be smaller, because as they worked through it, this really is what it means to get your farm or ranch prepared, or your house. So going through each of those topics piece by piece, and really understanding what is high risk, what you might actually be doing really well on, what you may be really behind on, and understanding that through that self-assessment. So then we can go next. Great. So that's your assessing your risk, looking at your vulnerability, and starting to take action. The next core component of being prepared is actually having plans. And you can see that I say increase your response capacity. So the most critical part of this is so that you can increase your capacity to respond quickly and effectively when a disaster does strike. Those of you who have been through a fire or have to be evacuated, you know, during the chaos, it's really hard to think straight or know what to do or what to prioritize first. So we really encourage you to create these plans ahead of time when you feel calm, and then actually practice them. That's another key component of making a plan. So the three main plans that we encourage you, and you'll see these in your workbook. So page 17 is going to be your communications plan. So this is something you would do with your family members, your crew, your neighbors, maybe backup support, where you'll establish an emergency communications protocol, including an out-of-area contact in case local phone lines are down, or like we know PG&E can get shut off. Communication equipment, having communication equipment like two-way radios or walkie-talkies, or even a megaphone, and a safe place to meet outside of the disaster area. Those are key components of a communication plan. Then you'll also really want to list your important numbers, so people to call, and have them in a really well-known, well-seen place, and make sure your family and your crew all knows where to find those. And we give you that little nice communications template so you can fill that out this winter. Next is your evacuation, and I'm still cracking myself up at this little sheep in the back of a truck icon that I made for you all, because I was farming in Sonoma County, and I heard lots of people who actually had to put their dogs and their sheep and their cats and their pigs in the back of their car when they were evacuating. So something to think about for you have livestock. But the ability to evacuate your farm for emergency responders, and for emergency responders to find and identify your property and your access points, is so critical. So make sure you have 2 or more roads in and out of your property. This is for you who are on land, and that all your farm personnel know how to get out, and that you agree upon a meetup place once you are evacuated. And then the next part is really creating and delegating tasks that you're all going to do during an evacuation. And that's for evacuating people, but as well as livestock. And BeeWell is really going to go into this and show you how they've thought through this and how they've delegated tasks between themselves and as spouses, but also between their crew. And then again, as somebody brought up earlier about having go bags, this is really important. Have your go bags stocked, ready, up to date, and in a really easy location for you to grab and go. And then, as I said, BeeWell is going to be a great example of what that looks like in action. Finally, the next part of your disaster preparedness is sheltering in place. And we have a new connotation of that now that we've been dealing with COVID for almost 2 years, but we originally started educating about this. This is really about wildfire. So this is what happens if you really can't get out. Maybe you've been evacuated, there's a road that's blocked, or you call emergency responders and they just tell you they can't come. What happens? What do you do? This is a scary situation, but this is the time to think about that. So that's choosing a room, or maybe knowing a neighbor that has, is ahead of the game on their creating defensible space and hardening off their structures, making sure you know where you're going to go. That happens. And then also having a shelter in place bag. So it's kind of like a go bag, but so that you could stay for a few days in place in your house, that in case the worst happens. All right, next slide. All right, finally, your action plan. I'm sure many of you are feeling a little bit overwhelmed, especially if you're looking through the workbook right now. So this is where we just want to take a deep breath and break this into bite-sized pieces. So go through your assessment, and then you're going to find, go ahead, Natalia. You're going to find a few high priority impactful pieces from the assessments to focus on, make a quick plan for what you're going to tackle just this winter, and ask what needs to be done, how you're going to do it, plan for your costs, and then give yourself a deadline. You kind of have to hit twice. There you go. So giving yourself a deadline on things is really important, and make sure to break it down. Choose like 3 things. Maybe it's decreasing your fuel load and creating a communications plan. And that's what you're doing over the next month. And that's how you start getting through this. And that's going to be your action plan. All right. I think we're going to, are there any questions at this point? Anybody want to bring up? Oh, I love the Octavia Butler comment. Thanks, Gian. Do you have any questions or comments, or I'm going to bring in BeeWell? And again, I just want to say this is all I'm glossing over a lot, and to remind you that we have a whole online course if you really want to dig into these things. So I just want to make sure this is seated and planted in your head as we go in to talk to BeeWell, because they're going to show you what it looks like in on-farm. All right, next slide. Awesome. Okay, so we are so lucky tonight to have BeeWell Farms here, Melissa and Austin Lely. They're in Glen Ellen, California, and they were heavily affected by the Nuns fire in 2017. And for those of you who remember who were here in California, it was massive, horrendous fire. They lost nearly everything they owned, and they were in a pivotal time trying to expand their operations, and then lost everything. But since then, they've been able to keep the farm alive and decided to make some transitions to their enterprise as they grow their family. They're also contributors. They have a podcast and a couple of videos from them on our online course, and they have a really sophisticated preparedness plans that they share there. They're going to tonight share their experience with their fires and their recovery, and you can see what preparedness looks like in action. All right, we can switch over to speaker view so you can actually meet them. All
Hey,
right.
everyone.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi, thanks for having me on tonight. And wow, that was a great workbook. I sure wish I had that before we were affected, but I'll probably be utilizing that even more now. So thank you.
Awesome.
Yes.
You helped us build it because your contributions definitely influenced the book. So you
Thank
can
you.
thank one of our advisors.
Yeah, so welcome, Melissa. Can you just share a little bit about your operation? I know everybody could see on the slide, but just tell us a little about your farm, and then describe your wildfire story a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Katie had mentioned, our farm has been kind of transitioning since the fire, but we were growing 3 acres of a market garden, just mixed vegetable crops. We had hundreds of egg-laying chickens that we would rotate around in the pastures. We had Hereford cattle that we would breed and sell steers, and then we had a few goats as well for helping out with the grazing. So that was kind of our mixed operation there. I kept honeybees, but that was always kind of just to go with the farm. I was never like into the honey part of it for income at least. So so that was kind of just like basics on everything that we did on our farm. We're just trying to diversify and integrate, you know, the animals and the crops and everything together. So in 2017, we were pretty much fully wiped out by the Nuns fire. It was about 11:30 p.m. and we were notified. We got a knock on the door from our neighbor who said there was a fire on the next ranch over and that we needed to evacuate right away. And we had our cattle in a big field where he said the fire was coming to. And so our first response was, we need to go see how close this is, see if we could evacuate our animals, and just check out like what we could do. And so threw on some more clothes, hopped in our car, went to see the fire, and it was right on the next property, huge wall of flames burning our way really fast, winds blowing our way. And as soon as we got to that side of the property, several fire trucks pulled up behind us and were like, you got to get out of here right now. Leave your animals. There's nothing you could do. And so we just rushed back home and just grabbed our dog and our laptop and some business documents and my wedding ring and fled. So we there was nothing at that point. It was already pretty much on top of us within, I would say, an hour. It probably burned over the farm, but we had to get out right then. So we had to leave our animals, and we evacuated to Sonoma to some, our family has a house in town, and we were able to just be there all night and kind of wait out the fire until the next morning, when first priority was to go in, see what was left, see if any animals were alive, and pretty much what we had to do at that point. So first thing in the morning, we went back and tried to contain all our animals, which all the fencing was burned, water lines, everything. Our whole house was gone. All the feed, our hay barn was gone. It had all the chicken feed too, and animals were just on the loose everywhere. It was chaos. So we just pretty much tried to find any material we could to gather them and keep them contained, and then from there find water sources to haul water to them, because with that many, I think, how many head of cattle did we have at that time? I think we were just starting out pretty much. I think there was 12 on that property. And with the fire and stuff, I had to bring them tons of water. So we were able to actually find a local water source, a house that didn't burn across the street, that was on municipal water, and the owners said we can fill tanks and bring it to them. So we happen to have some 55-gallon drums that we, put Jimmy rigged a hose to on the bottom, and we were able to just kind of bring them that, and try to find feed from Broncos, and we were able to get some hay, just like a few bales from them just for that day to suffice. And then we had kind of help from friends and family of gathering from local feed stores, like where could we get food, like kind of in a panic. So we were able to get a little bit brought in from there. And pretty much we just spent the next couple weeks in the evacuation zone, just trying to survival mode, like keep them alive. And we couldn't bring them anywhere. We didn't have any resources to move them at that point, and we figured, okay, the best thing we could do is just hunker down. Now the fire had already been through there, so it wasn't coming back. There was nothing left to burn. So that's kind of our story on how we got through that one.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It really hits home. It's easy to, when it's raining and green and winter time, it's hard to remember what it's like to have wildfires. So thanks for grounding us and sharing that pretty traumatic story. But you did survive, and you are still farming. So could you tell us a little bit how your farming system has changed since that fire?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've actually, we have decided that it's a good idea to kind of shift more into focusing on the grazing and the fuel load reduction part of the farm. And we've kind of started like downsizing our vegetable operation and growing our grazing operation. We now graze 7 ranches locally, so it's not just about our property, it's about making our community safer, and reducing the fuel load all around us as well, and for our neighbors' sake. But so we've kind of been shifting in that direction since then. And there's been several factors that have kind of led to that transition and that decision. We were not able to reinvest in starting up our chicken operation again after we lost everything through that. And so we were just like, okay, well, we tried to hang on to doing the vegetables for a while, and we were like, okay, like, I don't know how sustainable it is for us personally to try to grow that side of things in the financial and like land position we were in. And so the grazing was like the best option, but it also just really made sense to like, this area really just needs this. So we have kind of over the last several years made that transition into that. And now we're also kind of focusing on moving into doing some land management work now too. So my husband is like clearing brush and doing a lot more fuel load reduction out, like hand labor and with some equipment and stuff outside of the farm, because it just is such in high demand here. It's just really, you know, it's an ongoing need. So that's kind of the direction we're going, as you know, we grow our family. It also gives us a little more time. Vegetable farming was like really time consuming. So with having little kids running around now, it's like, I don't know, made more sense.
Thank you for sharing that and bringing up a really important topic that we'll actually be covering and we're presenting the Small Farmers Conference, but thinking about this as a community-wide effort and really trying to reduce fuel loads everywhere and responding together. So that's such a huge part and something we're really wanting to encourage too, because you can do all these things on your farm, and if your neighbors haven't done it, it makes it pretty difficult to survive a fire still.
Absolutely.
So you brought us into some of the chaos of what it felt like to have a fire come so quickly, and you just grabbed, you know, your laptop and your wedding ring and your dogs. And that was, you know, you've never gone through a fire. Now with fire season, you know, you are in a wildfire region. Can you tell us a little bit how that's changed, what your emergency response plan is like, and how you updated it, and what your communications plans are like during an emergency now?
Absolutely. Communication is key, and it's not as in-depth as your workbook, but with just, you know, mostly my husband and I being the ones running our own operation, but then we can communicate with each other, and we have a list of tasks we could delegate with each other. But we also live and work on another ranch that has a whole network of people too, and then being in communication with your neighbors as well, and having their contact information, and, you know, list of resources in case of an emergency. Like in the fire, for example, we all had to, or we didn't all have to, but it sure came in handy to know, like, oh, this neighbor has a water tender and this neighbor has a dozer, or, you know, whatever. So whoever's like in the evacuation area, it's like really good to know who's here, what can we share. So we have just like our emergency plan in like a simple folder, and we have like contact lists for all of our, it's just an Excel thing you put together. It's like several pages long, but all the people we would need to contact from our ranch and where we live, and then all our neighbors as well. And we have wildfire emergency protocol, which kind of outlines like who's responsible for what on the farm. Like we have a personal home plan. So, okay, what are we gonna do first at home? What, you know, loading go kits, loading pets, communicating with landlords, all of that. And then turning off like electrical stuff, moving vehicles to a safe zone, which we all have like mapped out as well, which is one great thing when I saw when you're talking about your workbook, like the map is really nice to have for everybody to kind of be on the same page about where everything is, and where people are supposed to locate things in an emergency. And then after our personal, it goes into like our farm plan. Okay, like who's doing what, from anything from like opening gates to contacting the neighbors to where we need to move animals and if we're going to evacuate them. And there's also like plan A, B, and C, because, you know, depending on the scenario, like things could change really fast. So there's like safe zone, like if you're sheltering in place, And then, okay, if that didn't work out and you have enough time, like where's the first location you would evacuate them to? And, you know, come up with a list of a couple if you are lucky enough to have those, you know, some resources available for that. And then also just like planning ahead for backups on everything. Like that's something like we didn't really, I mean, we never in a million years saw any of that coming. So we had nothing like backed up. Now we have like water storage and a generator and extra fuel on the ranch, and you know, like everything you could think of now is like, okay, we're ready for like pretty much the apocalypse now. So we're good to go there. But and it is kind of hard because when you're thinking of scenarios to plan for, it's like endless. Like, well, gee, like I can prepare for like a small little thing where I'm just evacuating like into town like I was able to before. But okay, now if your plan's to shelter in place, like you really got to have everything you need there, you know? So it like really, I don't know, your whole list could be different. You can have multiple depending on, you know, the size of your operation and what you think your needs are. So am I getting off topic a little bit?
No, this is
okay.
This is great. And do you all practice? Do you have how often do you update it?
We actually need to update it now, I'll be honest, because since it's been last updated, we've had a child and we have 2 more on the way. So my plan is a little bit different now than Austin's plan. So I'm gonna have to evacuate differently and probably won't be able to help load cattle in a trailer and evacuate them. And you know, so we definitely need to update our plan right now, which is great. We're in winter time, like we have time to prepare. Like this is the time to do that. So but typically like at least once a year before we enter fire season, we go through it all and just make sure everything's updated and kind of make sure everything we need is in place and ready to go and kind of well stocked up. So yeah, I'd say at least once a year.
Awesome. And then you had livestock when we first started talking to you years ago, and now you have more livestock. So can you talk to us about some of the unique considerations of having livestock during an evacuation?
Absolutely. Well, definitely having the right equipment for your enterprise is essential. We didn't have a livestock trailer. During the first fire, we knew people, so we would often borrow it from friends and family, or not family, friends and other local ranchers who were, you know, generous enough to let us use it when we needed to move cows. But our operation at the time was smaller, and we were mostly just utilizing one ranch. And now as we're growing things, we're definitely, you know, had a need for being able to transport our own livestock. So we had to, you know, make an investment there. And that's been just really essential, just making sure you have the right tools when you need them. And definitely like backup water and areas, safe zones, areas that, you know, if you are sheltering in place that you could bring your animals to.
What does that mean to be a safe zone?
So like areas that won't burn, essentially, like, so that have big buffers around them, and that, you know, you can move your animals to quickly in an emergency, whether it's with a trailer or, you know, just through your gate system or whatever. And just being in good communication with everyone about like where gates are and locks are and what the codes are and all of this stuff. So as far as like livestock goes, like that's, did I answer the question?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
And I'm about to open it up for everyone else. So everybody who's participating tonight, come up with some questions, because we're going to have about 5-10 minutes for you all to ask directly to Melissa. But before that, something we've noticed with our working with farmers and ranchers is that insurance is either a hugely helpful part of their recovery after a wildfire, but it also has been a major challenge for a lot of farmers and ranchers. Could you share experience around insurance with us? Because this is kind of the thing that seems boring to a lot of people, that is actually, we've found in our research to be one of the most critical parts of wildfire preparedness and recovery. So how did you go about getting it? What was it like when you did burn? Were you ready? And then what, have you filed a claim? Any tips and tricks for everybody else to get properly insured?
So we were definitely like extremely underinsured when we were wiped out by the Nuns fire. We were also, poor starting out farmers. So we were hesitant to get more insurance than we, thought we really needed at that point. We needed like auto, general liability, and we had like $1,000 to cover small tools and equipment. And we were trying to get by with bare minimum, payments for insurance and everything, because that's what we had at the time. And it was actually kind of interesting trying to like find someone who would cover a farm that small at that point. And because it seemed like a lot of insurance companies want to just hunk farms into this like agribusiness like category. And maybe things have changed a little bit since then. We've switched our insurance to a different company now that is working a lot better as far as like working with our needs, and we're definitely better covered now than we were back then, but we didn't know, we didn't see it coming, and we were just, like I said, poor, trying to get by with the minimum we could. That being said, now we work with Nationwide Insurance now, and they have pretty good abilities to kind of just give us what we need and then take it away when we don't need it. Like we were doing a pumpkin patch for several years, and so we'd add like an agritourism thing, and then like we didn't need that anymore, so they just dropped it. So, and they've been able to like work with us a little bit better there. I don't have much, I don't know about many other companies, but so far they've been pretty good with that. But definitely don't try to get by with the minimum because you don't want to get caught with not being covered.
Great, thanks. And I just saw Maggie commented, they live in Nevada County and there's an insurance crisis because the carriers are just dropping people. And yes, we're seeing that as well across California, especially high risk zones. It's something we're actually just got a grant for. We're trying to build education around insurance for small farmers because of this crisis, but it's really something we need everyone's brains on because it's very specific to your community and your region, who your service providers are, and the policy that has been pushed for farmers has not gone through. So this is a huge topic. And I know it sounds boring for a lot of people who've not been impacted by fire, but across the board, all farmers that we've talked to have been impacted by fire urge all other farmers to take insurance seriously. So we're hoping to bound together with everybody and put our heads together and really try to fix what's happening with insurance right now. We'll share with you a crowdsourcing doc that we're creating for farmers and ranchers, as well as all nonprofits. Anybody who's on this call can fill it out to help share service providers. If you've had a good experience, if you've had a bad experience, just so that we can collectively generate that knowledge. So we'll share that with you either now or in a follow-up email. And then I'd like to open it up. I don't know how chatty everybody's going to be, but I would love if all you participants would ask some questions for Melissa. It can be about fire preparedness. You can ask her what's in their go bag. You can ask her what it was like to recover from a fire, anything you want. So this is your time. Please go ahead and ask questions. Otherwise, I might just ask some people to ask questions because I know some of you out there.
I have 2 questions.
Great. Thanks, Amber.
Hi. So we're about to start integrated livestock systems at Pie Ranch, and I'm really curious how you perceive how easy it is to get animals to move when they are also threatened. And then my second follow-up is, in terms of the recovery process and insurance and stuff, did you reach out to any other agencies like Farm Service Agency or USDA to explore like cost share recovery programs in terms of infrastructure losses, like you mentioned fencing and that sort of thing? So just curious, I assume you were in survival mode, so maybe that was not on your radar. I'm just curious how well those programs were advertised at that time.
Yes, so in regards to your first question, I would say the more trained that your livestock are to come to food, like the easier it will be. So like with our cows, we can just yell, here cows, and they'll come because there's always food. So it was a little bit harder when they were stressed out, but we were still able to accomplish, getting them contained. We just had to, take our time, remain calm. If, animals could sense you. So if you're stressed and like frantically moving around them, they're going to be like freaking out too. So yeah, just being calm and it's okay, kind of guiding them in instead of like trying to scare them in, stuff like that. And making sure there's enough food wherever they're going. So, and then
just as a follow-up, would you attribute their like willingness and their relationship with you to be something that is sort of hinged on how frequently you interact with them? So like some grazers, right, move every day or every 3 days or something like really frequent. So just kind of curious if you could speak to that.
I definitely think so. And I'm not sure, like, is like a chicken compared to a cow, like if that, like I feel like with our cattle, definitely, like you just kind of feel more of like okay, they know me, they're comfortable with me, like they're gonna come, or there's kind of a trust element to it, versus yeah, just showing up every once in a while, and then they might, I don't know, like not be as comfortable. So yeah, I don't know, I just lost my video for some reason. Let me see if I could, there it is. And then did I answer your question there, or?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And then for your second question, yeah, we were actually and it was a complete game changer. We were not going to be able to continue farming if it wasn't for working with actually it was the USDA. They have the NRCS connected to them, and they were able to offer several grants that helped us get back on our feet. We applied for to replace fence line all around the property, hundreds and hundreds of miles of fence line, and water lines above ground, water tanks for storage backup, and like trough systems we lost, and just like debris removal and stuff in general. Like just like if it wasn't for working with them, there's not a chance we would have able to pay to do that ourselves or have the manpower to do that ourselves. So definitely, if for all of you out there who are affected by fires, like that was like the number one thing besides insurance, filing your claim, that's number one, like the day it happens. And then the second thing is to find every grant you can to help recover. So, and they did have one specific to the fire, but they have other grants that they continue to offer too, that because it takes a lot of time. Like some are only open for a short window after the fire. It's like you have to get this done now, and it's like, okay, well, if I'm doing all the fence lines, how am I going to have time to do the water infrastructure, so it's like just picking and choosing what's realistic for you at the time, but then talking to them about like, okay, what's available like after this emergency timeline grant, then what can I do later on, you know? So basics for us were fencing for containment and water.
And do you mind speaking to, just briefly on that same topic, did you already have a good like working relationship with an NRCS like conservationist or something like that? Or was this new process for you?
It was brand new. We had never worked with them or really knew much about them before. So it all happened due to the fire. I will say, like, once you started talking with them though, like it did make it, I don't want to say easy, but it was like, okay, well, one grant like kind of would help lead to another, to another, to another. So it was like, once you definitely got your foot in with them, they were like, oh, well, here's what else we could do for you. So yeah.
That's good to hear.
And they want to help. Like, I feel like one thing is, I don't know, maybe, I don't know how many people really like apply for these things, you know, but it's like the funding is there and they want to help people. So it's like, sometimes it might sound like tedious, like, oh, a grant, I don't know how to write a grant or anything like that, like this big process. But like once you just like get talking with them, they really do kind of like help you through the process. So it's worth it to just go for it.
Awesome. Thanks for those great questions, Amber. And thanks for super interesting, Melissa, for your experience. Does anybody else have questions? I know Natalia had some. Go ahead.
This might be for Melissa, it might be for the group at large. Hi, my name's Kelly. Thank you all for putting this together. We haven't experienced a wildfire on our farm. I'm in Washington State, but we have been adjacent to large wildfires that are happening just on the other side of the mountain and have had to navigate the smoke being present in our fields for long periods of time. And I've had a lot of trouble finding any direct information on how to protect my crew and how to make decisions about when we work and when we don't work, and what the actual recommendations are for like the PSI at which it's no longer safe to work, how to navigate making those decisions as a business owner, and kind of that risk evaluation for getting out in the field and harvesting versus not putting your crew at risk. And I was just wondering if anyone could direct me towards resources that would help me make a better decision other than just buy respirators and keep an eye on the PSI.
I could answer that. Cal OSHA, I think like if you have under 5 employees or something, like you're not like they don't make you like follow these rules, but Cal OSHA like has all rules about health and safety like outlined. If you just go on like calosha.com, like you can find all that information. I know with the ranch that we work for, like they have to document everything. If smoke's over, if the air quality is over a certain level, like either the staff have to sign a waiver saying they're aware, they've been offered a face mask, and they're going to continue to work, or they're allowed to like stop if they want. So yeah. And there's like they have all the documentation too, you could like print out too if you need that stuff.
Thank you so much for that question. It's huge in everybody's mind. And I farmed in wildfire region in Northern California for the last 5 years. And it's really frustrating because it sounds like there's some good materials out there, but at the beginnings of it, there really wasn't. And some of the recommendations are actually, they're pretty high levels of PSI that they allow workers to be out in. And so I think if you can, I worked with the farm owners I was working for in actually creating cushion funds to have days in which you could just pay your workers and let them go home. Because they kind of had a policy of if you felt sick, you could go home, but the people are paying their rent there for your farm workers might not make a good decision for themselves. So if you are a bigger farm and you're able to have cushion in your funding to be able to let people go home on those really bad days. And then I think actually having collective conversations about, what that feels like as a crew when you need to call it or switch to at least, packing or doing seeding or less intensive labor when it's a high smoke day. was some of the things that were our workarounds, or we would just do, an hour of harvest just to get the main cash crops out of the field right away and then switch to other tasks. But it's a hard one, and the smoke is definitely something I think there's not enough resources out, but something that we're hoping to generate. So thanks for those recommendations, Melissa. I think we need to switch over. Natalia, do you want to get into your section, or do you want to have a little more Q&A?
I think if there's anybody else with burning questions, we can make room for one more question. If not, I have a burning question, Melissa. Have you had to use your plans? You made your plan after the fire, the Nuns fire. Have you gotten a chance to use it during an actual fire?
No, thank God, but almost. So last year, actually it was like, I think 1 mile, or there's like a mile away from the farm was the mandatory evacuation line for, I think gosh, I'm getting all my fires mixed up now. I want to say the glass fire, but it like came like right close to us. And actually we were going to utilize our plan to shelter in place, and my water broke with my son, and so I had to evacuate to the hospital, and that changed everything. So but we were actually very fortunate that the winds turned and it didn't continue forth our direction. So but it was very close. Yeah.
Wow, that's super close. And have you had to make any claims on your insurance since you've gotten it? It sounds like you haven't had a fire, but maybe like smoke or outages or any other claims related to fire, and how has that been for you?
Just the original one from the Nuns fire, and everything actually went fairly smooth, even given we were underinsured, but we were able, as far as the whole process went, it was pretty seamless to go meet with them, answer questions. Like, it was a lot of paperwork to come up with, like you had to literally have a list of every single thing you owned, and we had to do that for the farm and for our household, and put a price to it, and have pictures to provide for proof. And there was a lot of paperwork, but you just go through the process, and they got you the money, and they were able to do like a few smaller payments leading up to like the bigger one, just to like keep us so we can live and survive and everything. And one thing I will mention about insurance is for anyone who rents out there, like, make sure you have, they call it additional, oh my gosh, what is it called? Additional living expenses. I'm pretty sure they call it ALE, and that covers, like, if you have to evacuate and go somewhere else, it covers all of your living expenses until you're back up on your feet. So whether or not you go stay in a luxury hotel, which I didn't, but I wish I would have known this, and it would have covered it, and all your eating out, gas, everything. So, but we ended up in a house that typically the rent would have been significantly more than the place we are currently renting, and it covered the gap. We still had to pay the price of what we currently had rented before the pre-fire, and then but it covered that huge chunk for us to stay in the nicer other place. So just until, it was only a temporary scenario where we were there, but it definitely helped us stay in the area. Otherwise, again, I don't think we would have been able to keep things going. So yeah,
that's a really good tip. I'm glad to hear that the process was smooth for you. It hasn't been for so many other farmers, so that's really a relief to hear. So I wish we could keep talking, but we do have to keep moving since it's getting pretty late, and I'm sure folks are eager to enjoy the rest of their night. So what we're going to do next is look at how you can bring to your farm and bring home what we've learned tonight. And just wanted to say thank you again to Melissa, and so grateful for you sharing your story and giving us an opportunity to learn from you. And many of the things that we've learned from you, as well as other farmers that have been impacted, is integrated into all of the resources that we're sharing with you. So can you see my screen? Let me see. Oh, was that Melissa? Okay, I think.
Sorry, Katie, I said thank you for having me. Sorry.
Yes, thanks for joining us.
All
Katie,
right.
is my screen, is it, all right, can you all see my my slide?
Yep, you're great.
Okay, great. So what can you do on your farm? Most obviously, if you haven't done this yet, you can create defensible space and harden your home. You should also reduce your fuel load of your surrounding forests and grasslands. And I won't go into depth since we have materials on this that you can get from our course. And there's many other organizations that serve these particular needs. And we really can't overstate the importance of practicing your emergency response with your whole crew and your backup personnel. And practicing that can really reduce stress. And as we've heard from Melissa, can really be an opportunity to make that process of responding just a lot easier and have losing less during your fire. As part of that, you want to set up and test your backup systems in the event of an electrical outage. Make sure your generators work with your cooling systems, your irrigation, and whatever you need to keep the farm running. And make sure you have water. Also, make sure your farm is wildfire ready and reduce your infrastructure vulnerability by looking at your piping, your irrigation, and your fencing and asking whether it can withstand high heat and winds. So in chapter 3 of the workbook that we shared with you tonight, you can find that comprehensive list that you can go through. And that's the list that we've compiled from farmers who've told us what they've experienced during a fire so that you can be more prepared in the event that you have a fire, an evacuation, or smoke. And if you have livestock, you can get, and you're in California, you can get an ag pass, which allows you to access your farm during a disaster when other people have to evacuate. The state ag pass program was approved by the governor in October. So we're really happy to see that moving through on the state level and hoping that within a few months, you'll be able to get that pass. Get infrastructure and crop insurance and understand exactly what's covered in the event of a fire. Have an agent visit your land. I know this one's really hard for small and diversified farms, but because insurance isn't really designed for us, but we will have insurance trainings, as Katie said, in the future. And finally, if you want to get more comfortable with fires and take your comfort with fires to the next level, you could get training with Trex on prescribed burning. OSA is also developing fire suppression training for farmers, and there will be curriculum coming through the Cal Fire for the Ag Pass program that we'll share with you when that's released. So what can you do in your community? First and foremost, work with your neighbors on fuel load reduction, evacuation, and response planning. As Melissa shared, this can be really valuable to know who in your community has what resources and what skills, and creating a mutual aid network together. Link up with local agencies, and Melissa also shared this, such as NRCS, who can provide funds for preparedness and for recovery. We've found that when farmers can link up to those agencies, they're better able to, if they can do it before an event, they're better able to access those funds more quickly during after an event. Link up with local organizations who serve the community in emergency response. And you can join forces with the local fire safe council if one exists, or you can make one if one doesn't. And they work, fire safe councils are grassroots networks that work to protect residents from catastrophic fires. And you'll also be eligible for funding if you are in part of those networks. You could join or create a fire adapted communities network in your region, which provide toolkits for how you can learn to live with fire in your community. And finally, you could, perhaps not finally, there's a lot of resources out there, but one that I want to highlight is that try to understand your local government's community wildfire protection plan. These plans are created by community members in partnership with fire agencies and local governments. And if you're in a fire safe council, you can possibly participate in developing one. And these plans really are an opportunity to influence where and how agencies are implementing fuel reduction and how federal funds are distributed on private lands. So that's a lot. We understand that doing only one or a few of these tasks can take a ton of money and time. And we don't want to overwhelm you, but we want to share what we can in terms of what's available to you. There are resources to support you, as Melissa shared. And though frankly, I don't believe that there's enough resources for farmers, which is why we're advocating for farmers to receive more support. But for now, we want to leave you with some resources that can help you. Many farmers go to NRCS for support, and NRCS can give you technical assistance and financial aid. We have a video in our course that can guide you through the different programs that they have. And that financial aid can be used to reduce your fuel load through forest management and prescribed grazing of farmland, not just forests. If you connect with them and get in their database, you'll have a much easier time accessing resources after disaster. So you can also check with your local RCD, which sometimes funds fuel reduction activities depending on your region. And you can check with your county and town to see what resources they have to reduce risk on private land, such as funds and training and technical assistance. For example, Marin offers defensible space and home hardening funds, which is really cool because I think those are harder funds to find. Check with your fire department because they can also offer funds, but they will offer more. Most of them seem to offer property evaluation. So they'll come onto your land and give you a sense of what you need to do to create defensible space and to reduce your risk. So some of these fire districts can work with you after you've done a property evaluation to help fund the process of getting more defensible space. You can also talk to your fire safe council to see what programs they have. And then there's a series of CAL fire grants, which support fuel reduction for private forest landowners. They can also support forest management plans with a forest advisor if you have forest. For some of these, though, you'll want to work with other landowners since there are acre minimums and many of them are forest focused. And so there's a lot of resources out there to help you with recovery. I think Melissa alluded to these as well. After a fire, and we will cover those in future webinars. But for now, we really just wanted to leave you with resources for preparedness, since that's what we're talking about today. And so to wrap up, we'd like to invite you to join our online course where you can have access to video guides for each of the components of the workbook. We'll share a direct link in the chat. Thank you, Katie. All you have to do is register with Farmer Campus, our online learning network, and it just takes a few minutes. And this is a direct link so that you can get access to all the materials and you could buddy up with someone in the network and have an accountability partner. We're also excited to share with you that we're having a facilitated conversation at the Small Farmers Conference this winter. It'll be a guided group conversation on how we can collectively build wildfire resilience in the agricultural community. So I hope you can join us for that. And like Katie said at the beginning, this is the launch of our webinar series, and we'll keep you posted for future events. We'd like to know from you, though, what topics you're most interested in. So I'm going to share a poll, I think.
While she does that, just wanted to reiterate. So our course is free, so this is pushing it for you. Let's see, Amber saying signed up for the whole course. We probably just need to go in and approve your request, Amber. There's a wall around it on the menu.
But now that we share that direct link, Amber, you'll be able to get right in. So that link will give you access without having to fill out the form. And I don't think, Katie, the poll is going to work, unfortunately. So our tech issue for the night. There's always got to be one, right? But you can email us or fill out our needs assessments. We do them frequently, and to choose the topics that you'd like to, or why don't you type them into the chat?
Here's what we were going to put into the chat, into our poll. So if you can really quickly, so all of our materials, including our course, we do needs assessment with farmers and ranchers beforehand. So our materials really are targeted by farmers telling us what they want to learn about. So before we end, if you can just do a shout out in the chat of what, your top 2 of the list that we just sent, that would be great, because we will actually be creating our workshops around the topics that we think farmers and ranchers most want to hear about, as well as things like insurance, who nobody wants to hear about, but we promise it is one of the most important things to learn about.
So thank you for doing that. And go ahead, Kitty.
And just for anyone, I see Judy sent me a direct message as well. If you just click on the link, you can register for the whole course. It'll take you in, and it has a whole guide of how to self-pace yourself in the course. It's 9 modules, and you can also just pick and choose the ones that are most appropriate for your farming operation. All right, well, thank you so much. We'll follow up with an email. We just sent you so many links, but we will send them all in another email. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here tonight.
Yeah, thank you for taking time out of your busy evenings